important to remember that, and I think it's often not remembered, that management is very hard. Management involves a lot of skills and a lot of experience, but not just experience of doing the same old thing, experience that is progressive. So we have to kind of understand that it is hard. Yeah, it takes years, it needs training, and a lot of people don't get the training or the experience. So we have to be kind of, in a way, understanding about that, yeah, and realistic about our expectations of management. But we have to strive for good enough management, right? So management is hard in any sector, and humanitarian work in particular, because it's very high demand, high stress, etc., etc. In my decades, I would say, because I've been managing for many, many years, I always look for, good enough managers. They don't have to be perfect, but they have to want to improve. If people who don't want to improve and they just want to keep doing the same things, I find it difficult to manage. And also there's a lot of people who don't strive to improve, right? So they become very mediocre managers, and can also, and mediocre managers or not so good managers, people who don't want to improve, that they think that they're fine, can cause a lot of damage to others. Yeah. So you will always find, in proportionally, more mediocre managers than great managers. That's just the same with leadership as well. You will find few real leaders. And if you look around in the world, it's the same. A manager is always a combination of many things. That's why it's difficult. Personality, emotional intelligence, different skills and abilities, and of course, knowledge. So there's a lot to combine together, right? And there are a few people, if any, I don't think there's anybody who's perfect in all of those things. So it's good to think of these kind of pillars as being kind of in a continuum. And when you're thinking about yourself or looking at others, kind of isolate the different pillars of management. Because incompetence isn't just he's incompetent and that's it. No, it's a thing of areas and it's a thing of degrees. So there's probably, though, a higher proportion of dysfunctional managers in humanitarian work than in the private sector. And there are many reasons for that. That are kind of characteristic of humanitarian sectors, or what we would call high turnover industries, high demand industries, and not so many people who kind of want to do it. Management is something, as I said before, that requires gradual training, gradual exposure, gradual experience, and on-the-job support. To managers aren't born. That's a myth. It takes years because there's so many things involved, so many skills that you have to keep trying to improve, and people and things change all the time. So you might be good at managing one type of people, but not so good at managing other types of people. And in humanitarian work, people don't get that gradual time, right? They kind of get pushed into positions that are too much for them too quickly. And there isn't a gradual enough progression in most humanitarian hierarchies, let's say. Also, people develop best in managerial environments where the gradual progressive steps upward are supported, no? And you gradually get increased responsibility. Once you've become comfortable with a certain amount of responsibility, your responsibility increases. The decisions you have to make in terms of their importance or the stakes that are in play become gradually bigger, right? You don't go one day making small little decisions about, 5 euros, and then a month later you're making decisions about 5 million euros. That's what I mean, And then there's the scope and the scale of what's being managed, right? So one thing is managing a project that's, say, 500,000, and another thing is managing a project that's, say, 8 million, okay? And it's the same with people and complexity and things like that. So the ideal is managers become more and more experienced with time and support, not just throwing them into positions. You can see this in other sectors, for example. No one would take a doctor who's just finished their studies and their residency and put this doctor in charge of a 200-bed hospital, right? It takes them years to go into these types of positions. That would be crazy, right? But sometimes in the humanitarian work, we do that. Now we take someone who's hardly got any experience and we put them managing big teams or a lot of complexity in medium risk environments. So, I mean, the expectation of people to perform well when they don't have the correct experience or the right progression is kind of unrealistic. And then, as we'll see later, that causes damage. So, managing in humanitarian work or other pressure professions, like emergencies or emergency services in hospitals or, I don't know, things like that is tough. Yeah, and humanitarian management is particularly challenging because there's scale, there's complexity, there's pressure, the working conditions are difficult, there's a lot of inexperience, and there's a lot of multicultural differences, okay? And some people are in their home environments and some people aren't. And that makes a difference as well. And not to mention, of course, that there's risk. All of this is then made worse by lack of adequate training and support. And then, of course, each person has their own kind of idea of what a good manager is. I prefer to use the word competent because good and bad is very binary. Humanitarian managers are managing teams and assets in crises and emergencies and complex situations. So, in theory, logically, they should be even better equipped as managers, more experienced than, say, somebody working in some small company in some small town in a very safe country, So it's not the other way around. Just because you're a humanitarian work, the managers are less competent. They should be even more competent. However, as most of us are already aware, that's not the situation of the type of managers we tend to find in humanitarian work. No. And here are some of the reasons why. Check it out in the next video.